wanted to again thank you for participating in this. What is the role of both the chair and the vice chair of the Iowa Democratic Party? And we'll go ahead and task with Mr. Wilburn with this question, and then June, you can also answer if you like on the vice chair positions.
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you. I want to thank Hola Iowa for this opportunity to speak with you all. I've somewhat familiar with the format of publication, the work that is done just from having been in elected office for a few years. The way that I envision the work of the chair and the vice chairs is really similar to what one might look as a city manager and the mayor of a city, and therefore the mayor pro tem. The Iowa Democratic Party has had and will have an executive director that will carry out the operations, supervise the staff, and the chairperson, and therefore especially the first vice chair, is responsible for helping set policy, for the lead on fundraising, for a lot of the community outreach, really the face of the party, if you will, outside of the elected offices. And first, I do want to congratulate June Owens. She's once again serving as the first vice chair and was the first Black African American person of color, as far as I know, to serve in that role. So, June, I don't know if you want to add anything to that framework that I talked about in terms of the mayor, city manager, that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with as Chair Wilburn has described our roles, and a little bit more about my role in Vice Chair. Specifically, I, as well as Chair Wilburn, serve on an organization called the Association of State Democratic Committees, and that committee is tasked with helping state parties to become stronger, provide training and resources. And so, in additional respect, that I help lead our recruitment efforts and some of the training efforts that we provide to our county parties and to candidates through the work of the ASDC.
I wanted to touch upon the historical significance of the two of you leading the state Democratic Party of Iowa. It is the first time that you've had the tandem of two African Americans at the top of the party structure. But even in this year, the special nature of it, considering that the DNC chair is also an African American, I believe the second African American to lead the Democratic Party, and Jamie Harrison as DNC chair, but then also to have Kamala Harris as her vice president. What is the significance to both the community, the Black community in Iowa regarding your two positions, but then also to have the leader of the DNC and the VP to be members of the community?
I think it's very significant, and I'm always humbled and honored to be and have been in a position where I've been the first. And then when you've got all these other positions aligned, some of the listeners may not know that I was the first African American mayor of the city of Iowa City. I'm currently a representative in Ames, and I believe I'm the first Black person in that seat as well. And so it's a tremendous honor. It's a tremendous responsibility to represent and to try and bring that perspective to any discussions, any policies. So it's significant in that way. When I was a mayor, and the first Black mayor of Iowa City, for some, it was very significant. For others, that was 2006 when I became the mayor, and they said, well, it's 2006, we should be. And I said, well, but think about that. It's 2006 and the first Black mayor of Iowa City, one of the more progressive areas in the state. And so I just think in terms of bringing a different viewpoint, different life experiences, because as we know, even within the Black community, the Latinx community, that there are differences in opinion, personality, viewpoint, but we share a common experience with having a historical and current discrimination against us. So, I view it as significant, and unfortunately, there's part of our country that that people that do have racist views that they don't like it at all, and we need to move beyond that. We need to reach out to the folks who say that, well, of course, we don't see color. We should to let just as gender is important that we have a different viewpoint and experiences. It's the same with race.
When talking about that specifically for the two of you, what we just saw in this election cycle in 2020, where the state of Georgia, with an increase in turnout of Black voters, helping to flip not only the state for Joe Biden, but also flipping 2 Senate seats in the same year. At the same time, in Arizona, you saw a flip of a secondary Senate seat for Democrats, and then also flipping Arizona for the first time since the 1960s to the Democratic side. There has always been a criticism of the Iowa Democratic Party that not enough of this outreach exists to BIPOC, to Black, Indigenous, people of color. What is the level of investment, in your view, that you want to see from IDP in organizing these communities for the elections, both of the city election this year and the general election of 2022?
I'd like to start, and then I want to make sure in this question we get June involved, because she's playing a critical role in that, in my opinion. Look, the Democratic Party loses when we don't strengthen and maintain relationships with the BIPOC community here in the state. It's present, it's here. The issues that face people of color in the state of Iowa in terms of lack of opportunity, discrimination, are similar to your South Carolinas, your Georgias, and even Illinois, near where there's numerically per capita more diversity. But I put forward, if we can create those opportunities here in Iowa, if the nation can support us and support BIPOC people here in Iowa, then we can do it anywhere in the country. But we've got to strengthen that outreach. June's got a couple projects that she's going to talk to you about that we're doing, but I view it as critical. I've already, been working with, in my role, in my dual role at the Capitol, that both the Black Caucus and the Latinx, the Asian Pacific Islander folks that have been at the Capitol talking about some issues with subcommittees. So I've been connecting with both hats in that way, but I want to make sure, again, we get June in on this response.
Yeah, and what I would add to this conversation is that, look, every 2 years, we build, and then we revamp every 2 years, and we have to get to a place where we're doing year-round organizing with all communities, marginalized communities. And so, the Iowa Democratic Party, we have invested in having staff whose specific role is reaching out not only with marginalized communities, but working closely with our constituency caucuses to help build and grow the party. But also, we have the commitment of working with the House Truman Fund and the Senate Majority Fund to make sure that we have a diverse slate of candidates that are running in their communities and getting people excited to get out and vote, and knowing that there's going to be people at the table advocating for their communities, advocating those issues that keep folks awake at night. And so we know that equity and inclusion is important. And so there's a commitment on the behalf of the party to build a deep blue diverse bench, which is one of the programs that I'm helping to lead with our Build Our Bench program, looking to recruit candidates up and down the ballot, from Soil and Water Commissioner to governor, that reflect the rich diversity in communities that we have around this state. So we're really excited for what's next.
If I could add too, because I think this connects back to an earlier question in terms of significance. I mentioned I was the first Black mayor of the city of Iowa City. I was the second to have served on city council, but there was at least maybe 10 to 15 years between the first person and myself. But since I was the mayor and on city council, there have been 4 who have run for city council, 3 who were elected served, but the 4th who had lost is now serving as a county supervisor in Johnson County. And the current mayor of Iowa City is an African American. There's also someone of African descent on the city council. So that just shows you the importance of not only what Vice President Kamala Harris says, the first but not the last. And so just that awareness that it's an opportunity is something that you can do, and someone that you can reach out to, because I know June's always reaching out to people of color that are interested in running for office, and I always, I've been elected office for 14 years now, and I've always had BIPOC people reaching out to me about how do you do it, what it's like to be the candidate.
Actually, I do like the fact that, June, you mentioned both the Senate Majority Fund and the House Truman Fund. That has been one of the biggest criticisms that folks have had over the last, well, I would say decade, is that we have had candidates of color who have run for positions, but have run mostly as cannon fodder, have run in very in Republican areas, but you rarely see them be propelled in both swing districts and even in blue districts, recruiting them in blue districts. We do have a handful of African Americans. The Republicans have just elected their first African American legislator in Mr. Andrews, and then the Republicans beat the Democrats to the punch in electing the first Latino to serve in the Iowa legislature in Mark Cisneros. That is a criticism here that IDP has had. Most folks don't understand that there is, three different branches of electing people to office. You have the Iowa Democratic Party itself, who helps to run a statewide campaign every 2 years, but then you also have the House Truman Fund, which is a separate political entity of IDP, and the Senate Majority Fund. What is the level of pressure, or at least encouragement, that you, Chairman Wilburn, would place on these two entities to do a better job of recruiting people of color, not only in your regular seats that they have, like in Sioux City and Wapello County, but in places where Democrats are safe and are swing districts?
Obviously, June had mentioned, every couple of years, but there's always a review after election of what happened. In fact, right now, the party has both funded and is a participant in a study called the Hughes Project that is taking a total look at where the money was spent, where it was raised, messaging, polling, whether it worked or not. So I think that's something that we're looking for recommendations from moving forward. Clearly, there have been some issues, concerns, and we want to address those. I think another piece of that, you're referring to what some people feel is a lack of support, but I think you also talked about kind of a misunderstanding. I think we need to do a better job of not all the nitty-gritty details, but to help inform and educate Democrats about what support is provided. Some of it is financial, some of it is people power, and people don't necessarily know who is doing what, or that a television ad may appear and they don't realize who has funded that, or but this last election cycle statewide, I will give one example where there was a positive in the Fort Dodge area. African American ran, and he did a fantastic job of raising money. And it was a combination of funds from those sources, but also people power. But clearly, I think another area is just in terms of access to voter information. Make sure that those are things I'm going to try and clean up. But we do want to be, June is continuing to gather names of folks who are interested in running, and I think in part that Hughes Project about how we are doing elections and how we are supporting candidates needs to be further explored, and some education about what it's like. I mean, it's hard to run for office. I mean, I can tell I've run for office. I've 8 times. I've won 5 elections. I've lost 3. I ran for city council twice before I got on the third time. So it does take, it can be frustrating. But we need those folks who take that challenge to step forward and run. We can't just leave them behind afterwards. We need to talk to them to try and figure out how we can continue to develop them. And June, I don't know if you want to add anything about candidate development or anything that I might have missed.
No, you're spot on. And, I'm going to go back to talking about, our Build Our Bench program and making sure that it's a diverse bench. We know that trained candidates are good candidates. And so I'm making sure that diverse pool, reaching out to diverse organizations, diverse partners, diverse communities, to make sure that potential pool of candidates is diverse and that they're trained and that we're helping to provide those free training opportunities to those who may wish to raise their hand and run for office. And so I'm really excited about that program and also about the information as well that we'll share with folks about what the House Truman Fund really does, what the Senate Majority Fund really does, and what type of support they can and may receive. So I agree with Chair Wilburn to add that as well.
Thank you for that, for that answer from the both of you. I wanted to move on to the legislative component to your position, Chairman Wilburn. The criticism, obviously, that exists of IDP for the past 10 years is that Democrats in general have been out of power in the state of Iowa and have not been able to keep Republicans accountable for their actions. And because of that, they keep getting elected to the legislature. A criticism that exists is that IDP isn't taking its role or position seriously when the legislative session is in office and not doing enough to activate their activists, activate their voters to mobilize against Republican measures that you're seeing in the legislature this year and in previous years. Is it time for the Iowa Democratic Party to take more of a approach, an activist approach, aggressive approach, in motivating people to get involved and reaching out to their legislators, if they're Democrat or Republican, and encouraging them not to vote for specific pieces of legislation? Up to this point, that role has been largely left to organizations like Planned Parenthood or the unions around the state, whether it be teachers unions or other unions, and then some other organizations like CCI and even the ACLU and LULAC. NAACP as well being involved in that. Is it more now a responsibility to kind of build up for 2022 to do that?
I think it's critical that all of the Democratic Party, the electeds, our structure through the counties, as well as all of our partners that you mentioned, that we are moving towards that same star. It can't be just about getting elected. It's about issues and building those relationships and that community engagement, the year-round engagement that June referred to, that part of that during the off-cycle election years that we're talking about issues. One of the things that I've tried to do here in the last couple weeks with some hurtful legislation that the Republican Party has come up with, one around essentially defunding education, and starting the legislative session in the first 2 weeks, we didn't talk about anything except for guns and abortion constitutional amendments. And regardless of where you are on those positions, why now? We're still in the middle of the pandemic. We still need to have vaccinations in people's arms. The governor just admitted, essentially, she didn't have a plan for getting vaccines into people's arms. And it's great that that President Biden, in the short time that he's been in office, has doubled the amount of vaccinations that are available. And so one of the things that I've done, at least through social media, gotten an email through our structure out to our county chairs, our state central committee, about the election bill. The education bill that occurred last week, and they were starting to spread that on social media. One just went out yesterday, or is coming out today, about the election. They're trying to make it harder to vote in a state that prides itself on elections and caucuses, and so that's disenfranchising voters. It's disenfranchising BIPOC people, and so we need to strengthen our relationships so that that messaging that I'm putting out is one part, is going out to all the partners that you mentioned. I also want to encourage, you all to sign up for the social media, those that do social media, for the House Democrats, for the Senate Democrats, those of you that are Democrats, so that you can see the messaging that they're putting out. As chair and as a legislator, I'm also working with Senator Zach Walz, in the minority leader in the Senate, and Representative Todd Pritchard, the minority leader in the House, to try and begin coordinating some similar messaging. So those are some efforts that we need to strengthen that now, and it can't just be 5 months before an election. We need to do it year round, as well as getting from my point of view, from our point of view, getting Democrats or those that share Democratic values running for school board, city council, library trustees, beginning with elections this fall.
Well, one of the roles that you will have to deal with as chairman of the Democratic Party, obviously, is the aftermath of the 2020 Iowa caucus. Not talking about what happened on that day, since you were not a member of the Iowa Democratic Party at the time, but moving forward, what you'll have to deal with for the next 2 years. Look, I'm an Iowa caucus goer. I've been for 20 years. It's a tradition of Iowans. It's, we're spoiled with it. But we've also been having to deal with the criticism of the Iowa caucuses since the 1980s, right? Moving forward, what does it look like for Iowa Democrat? The role that the two of you have as DNC members, voting members of the DNC as electors, do you just play the waiting game, wait to see whether or not we do have a contested 2024 primary, or we have pretty much a repeat of 2012, where it was just a re-election year for President Obama? We have a re-election of President Biden. Do we wait for the DNC to set the schedule, or do you use your power as a state legislator and start having conversations with Chairman Kaufman and Republicans in the legislature as to what changes need to happen legally for Iowa Democrats to transition from a caucus to primary, if that's basically what ends up happening? Or do you just, again, play the waiting game and see what, whether it be that this is handled this year or handled in 2023?
I'm smiling because that's a big package of stuff. You mentioned, I'm just coming on as chair, but the Democratic Party did do a review of contracted to have a review of what had happened. And so there's some lessons to learn. I will point out that every 4 years after the caucus, there are some lessons to learn and to try and continue to improve that. I've hit the ground running already, even though this is my end of my 3rd week, I believe, as chair. I've had a phone conversation with IDP, with the DNC chairperson, Jamie Harrison, to just kind of talk through broadly about the relationships with us and the entire DNC, but also New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina Democratic parties. And Iowa plays a critical role in that selection process through the caucus and being first in the nation with the caucus. It's an opportunity, as you know, for candidates to get used to that retail politics. What's it like to be on the ground, interacting with people, whether it's on a farm, whether it's in a black barber shop, whether it's in a cafe, wherever it is, to help them refine their message, to help them incorporate real life stories into their messaging to prepare them for the national stage. If it goes to a state where it's all television ads and it's a national debate, they aren't necessarily prepared to incorporate those real life stories into the issues. So it's early in the process. DNC Chair Harrison mentioned that no decisions have been made. The Bylaws and Rules Committee that June might be able to correct me, but I think they're just going to be meeting in in March or April to look back, to review. Chair Harrison mentioned that it won't be until the fall, until late summer, that people are appointed to Rules and Bylaws Committee. They won't begin those discussions until early fall. However, I've been in touch with the chairperson of the New Hampshire Democratic Party. I've been in touch with the chair of chairpersons, essentially, Ken Martin in Minnesota, in the Democratic Farmers Labor Party up there. And so I've been making those connections. I have had a couple phone conversations with Iowa Republican Chair Jeff Kaufman. I also actually just talking about where my roles kind of collide. He happened to be at the Capitol yesterday, and he and I touched base on what are you hearing, what am I hearing, that type of thing. But so the connections are being made, and we're prepared to do what we can to keep Iowa involved in that first in the nation, and being able to prepare our candidates, whether they win Iowa or not, to be a more effective candidate and to win some elections.
One of the things that we saw in 2020 was just this, for a second time in a row, Iowa went for Trump, and up and down the ticket, it was just a massive feat for Democrats. Is there something to be said that Iowa Democrats have a problem with rural voters, either that the messaging of Iowa Democrats is either not appealing to rural voters, maybe rural voters are just not wanting to be members of the Democratic Party, or what is the third option that exists in that? Is it that Democrats need to change, adapt their message to rural voters, or is it that rural voters just aren't welcoming of the message of the Democratic Party?
You just have to look at the map to reaffirm, the voters that you did talk about that voted for Barack Obama twice and then drifted away from the party. Broadly speaking, I think it's a situation of people in rural areas, and I won't limit it to there, people not feeling that the Democratic Party is at their side, as opposed to just saying we're on your side. It goes back to that year-round organizing messaging that June had talked about, to connect people with issues, to make sure that we are not just showing up saying, vote for us, register to vote, but we are going to different communities with their agendas, and that I'm trying to fundraise so that we've got staff that are available to make those connections, to go to a LULAC club just to sit and listen to what's on the agenda and the topic, to not show up to really say anything other than I'm here to listen, as opposed to bringing the Democratic agenda. And I think once we're able to do that, in addition to just highlighting and showcasing positive things that are going on in communities, and oh, by the way, there are Democrats that are involved doing that, or there are Democrats showing up and supporting that effort. June, anything you want to add to that we've talked about that I glossed over?
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Showing up and showing how we're living our values in communities, whether they're urban or rural, is important. And one of the programs that I'm so grateful for Chair Wilburn for supporting is called the Iowa Democrats Care Program. That's based upon a program that was done similarly in South Carolina with Jamie Harrison, but that's where Democrats are showing up and showing through their values and living those values of giving back to their communities, and showing that we're the party that cares about those issues that keep your family awake at night, that impacts your community. And so I'm giving back through service, through charitable endeavors, whether it's giving canned goods to a food pantry, giving warm clothing to children in zip codes who may be underserved. How is it that Democrats are showing up and living those values, and that we're on your side and at your side? And that's just one of many of opportunities that we have planned in the party to show that we're not just talking about it, but that we're being about it.
And we saw that just in the last couple of days in Texas, where Beto O'Rourke was making phone calls with his volunteers making phone calls for organizations to help people that need to get to warming centers or need to get access to food or water, et cetera, with what's going on in Texas. Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez just raised $1 million just from her donor base to give to charities in Texas that are providing aid to Texans there. Is there any plans for the Iowa Democratic Party to be more proactive in future when we do have these types of catastrophes in the future, like specifically with what we saw with El Derecho last summer, where we had some major damage and folks were left homeless? Is that sort of like the area where you're talking about for involvement of the Democratic Party?
June, you want to start with the Democrats' care?
Yeah, absolutely. We know, 2020 was a year like none other. The impact of the COVID virus, diverse communities, has opened up disparities in such a large way. We know in rural areas that was hit hard by the derecho, it was unprecedented to have climate change impact our communities in Iowa like it did. And so, yes, through the Iowa Democrats Care Program in all 99 counties, we're organizing with our county parties to activate volunteers to be there for their neighbors, not just to show that we care, but also because it's the right thing to do. We're excited about those opportunities, and we're planning to be definitely more proactive with helping to encourage activists, electeds, county party leaders, district party leaders, and our state party leaders to give of time, talent, treasures, to show up and be there at their side of their neighbors and our neighbors.
You mentioned Texas and what's the tragedy that's going on down there, and I've got a lot of relatives in the Austin and Dallas areas. What they have been describing in the media is that those utility companies, they ignored advice from the feds to winterize coming into this. And that's a policy decision. And broadly speaking, they chose not to. A lot of times you hear Republicans talking about let the free market work. That's an example where the free market didn't respond in preparation. And that's one of the differences between government. You hear people saying run government like a business. Well, government can be business-like in trying to be efficient and to deliver services. But government has a broader responsibility, one, to the people, but in terms of preparedness and stretching, to prepare for that rainy day, or in this case, that these unforeseen natural disasters. And so, you hear Republicans talk about, small government's too big. I've always been about effective and efficient government. What is it you need to deliver the services to create opportunity for all people, but especially those that don't have the opportunity, the resources that others do. And so it relates to messaging. And back to the earlier question about what happened, the disconnect in some of the rural areas. And so I think part of what we need to do is be more effective about talking about some of those themes. Another critique of the Democratic Party within is just the size of our platform. And the Republican platform is much smaller. And I believe it's important we retain and develop, refine what's in our platform, but we can look for themes and themes we can message around to help in addition to building and strengthening relationships so that people know and feel that Democrats are at their side and not just saying we're on their side.
And we don't have very much time left. We have about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. I know that you have to move on as well to other things, June, as well for you. I wanted to give the last 3 minutes to the two of you. This question really comes down to one, what do you want the Latino community to know about you as an individual in this position, and what does it mean to be an Iowa Democrat?
Absolutely. I want the Latino community to know that I want to hear, I want to listen, I want to strengthen some of the existing relationships that I personally have, but as well as a legislator and now chair of the Democratic Party. That I ran for governor and didn't win, but it really kind of put me in a position to get elected to my legislative seat. An expression, a theme that I had was "Let's be Iowa." Well, I didn't quite round out that thought, and it's "Let's be Iowa," standing for people and creating opportunities, and that's standing for, for BIPOC, for the LGBT community, for people living with disabilities. That we need to create opportunity for everyone and have that efficient, effective size of government to lift all of us up. We need to be moving towards, it's not one star, there are multiple stars because there are some unique differences and values philosophy, but the Democratic Party has always been about justice. It's in the Constitution, one of the first US Constitution, one of the first charges to establish justice. And justice includes creating opportunity, but getting rid of barriers for opportunities for everyone. And so reach out to me, reach out to June, reach out to all our vice chairs, reach out to your county Democratic Party. There's a lot of Iowans. There's a lot in the Latina community out there. So try and connect with the Democratic Party, even at the local level, so that so we've got the communication going and that we're educating each other about issues. So. And for those that are primarily Spanish speaking, I apologize that I am not able to effectively communicate directly in your beautiful language. I took French in college and not Spanish, and I wish I'd continued with and taken the opportunity at a younger age to learn more languages than just English and the little French that I do.
We do have less than a minute. Just wanted to ask, will we see any Spanish content, social media wise, from IDP in the future?
Yeah, I think we need to work with that. And yeah, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was saying, of course, absolutely. We know that providing material in the second languages is very important. So yes, definitely.